Welcome to the Ascension Program podcast. I'm your host, Momita Paul, and today we are going to talk about spiritual awakening of the masses. How to do it, what are the benefits, why should we do it, and what are the methods? With the author of 40 books, notably the Conversations with God, my favorite series all time, the legend who rewrote the 10 commandments of Bible in one of those books. Let's welcome Neale Donald Walsch. Welcome, Neale.
Thank you, my friend. It's lovely to be here. How may I be of service to you?
We are going to discuss about how we can help people awaken in different ways through your stories, through the books you have written. So let me introduce you to the audience a little bit about you. Most people already know you. He has written 40 books on contemporary spirituality and its practical application in everyday life. This is what I really like about his work, including his book God Talk: Experience of Humanity's Connections with a Higher Power, which is his latest book. Neale is the best-selling author of the Conversations with God series. I've read 7 of those books, by the way. Book 1 remained on that list for 134 weeks. His titles have been translated into 37 languages and have been read by millions of people around the world. His website is nealeDonaldWalsch.com. Neale, your books were a game changer for me in terms of understanding spirituality and its depth. So my first question is about how I felt when I read your book. When I read this sentence from God, the entity you were speaking with, about your purpose, the God reminded you that you are here to remind others who they are. And when I read that, I was shocked because 1 year before I read your book, that is what was revealed to me as my purposes. And to have it reflected back to me in this manner was absolutely crazy. Like the exact sentence, like not even one word was changed out of it. So when I was going through your bio, I again noticed another similarity where you are using spirituality with practical applications, which is what I'm doing with my work. Every time I read your books, I get goosebumps. So tell me, Neale, how are you reminding others who they are? How do you do it?
I endeavor to remove any idea I have about other people when I first see them. I eliminate from my mind any judgment, any thought, any idea whatsoever that I might have, and even a first impression that I might form with regard to another person. I just eliminate all of that. And I remind myself of who it is I'm really looking at. But I have to first know who I am, because I cannot see in any other person what I do not see in myself. I want to suggest, my friend, that many people on the planet do not really understand who they really are. They may think that they are this body, and then they may think that they are this mind. But we are not our body and our mind. Our body and our mind are simply tools, pieces of equipment, if I could put it that way, that who we really are uses in order to complete its agenda. So who we really are is a spiritual being. I believe that I'm a spiritual entity, and I believe that I am not just any old spiritual entity, but that I am, in fact, an individuation of divinity. And I believe that we all are. But if I don't believe that about myself, I cannot see it in anybody else. So the first step for me is embracing the truth of my real identity, that I am a spiritual entity. We say in English, we use the word soul, S-O-U-L, that I am a soul and that I am an individual expression of God. Now, once I embrace that notion about myself, then I can see you in exactly the same way. And I can see everyone else in the same way, even people that I disagree with, people with different, philosophical ideas or different political points of view or in different sexual orientation or different nationalities or different skin color, people with differences. I can look past all of those differences and see through their physical expression and experience who they really are. So that's the first step for me, is to embrace who I really am and then to erase all first impressions that I get from anyone else. And for instance, the moment that I saw you on the screen, I thought, oh my God, I'm looking at an angel. Human beings cannot be this beautiful. An actual person on the earth can't be this beautiful. But now I realize actually you are a person on the earth who's astonishingly beautiful, but you're still a spiritual entity. You're a spiritual being, and you are an individual expression of divinity. So I eliminate my first impression and I move to my highest knowing. That's not always easy when the other person, as I mentioned a moment ago, is a person that we dramatically disagree with. But even if they are our enemies, we are invited to embrace their true identity as a spiritual entity. And
I wanted to pause you here. You mentioned something very interesting. So, you mentioned that when I'm looking at someone, you see an individuation of source consciousness, just like you experience yourself as an individuation of source consciousness. So, when you are interacting with others, you know that they are also the same. So, how do you differentiate the individuations? Like, how do you perceive that in others? What makes you feel like, as you said, that it's difficult to sometimes erase our first impressions? So, how do you again recenter yourself and connect to their individuality?
I remembering the aspects of myself that I don't agree with,
Mm-hmm,
that I wish were not there.
mm-hmm,
So when I set aside every aspect of myself that I don't agree with and that I wish were not there, things that I have said in my life, things that I have done in my life, ways that I have behaved in my life that I'm not proud of, when I set those aside, and that's an act of deliberate consciousness, I just simply say to myself, yes, I did those things, I said those things, but that's not who I am. I simply, in those moments, forgot who I really am, or maybe didn't even know at the beginning who I really am. Because, we live in a culture that does not teach us this when we're very young. At least my culture did not. When I was a small boy, nobody said to me, "You're an individuation of divinity." Nobody said to me those kinds of things. So, I didn't even begin to embrace such a possibility until I was much, much older as a human being. So, that's the first step for me. How I set aside my ideas about someone else is to set aside my ideas about myself that I disagree with. In other words, I guess I would say I forgive myself for my failings and I have compassion for myself. And if I'm willing to have compassion and forgiveness for myself, then I find it possible to have compassion for you as well.
That is fascinating. And I wanted to move on to the next question. So I will be quoting from your book, Tomorrow's God, because that's the one I'm reading right now. So I'm just quoting from the book. When will it be complete enough for things to start getting better around here? Was your question to God. And God's answer was, it is simply a question of reaching critical mass. Critical mass is reached when 2 to 4% of the whole is affected. So then you said, So, a relatively small number of us must make the choice to create that shift in our understandings about God. What could make humanity willing to make that choice? So, the answer that God expanded throughout the book so far that I've read was more, there could be more hatred or there could be more hope. But since you have written 40 books and you have had many conversations with God, I want you to summarize the steps, if you can, about what could humanity do to make that choice, to make that shift in their understanding about
Oh,
God.
well, Mahatma Gandhi answered that question beautifully.
Hmm.
I don't even have to offer my answer. I simply embrace the answer that was given to us by Mahatma Gandhi. He said, be the change you wish to see in the world. So what I try to do is be the change that I wish to see in the world, model the behavior that I wish to see all people model and do it in the best way that I can. I'm not going to be perfect all the time. Well, that's not exactly true. Neale, am actually pretty close to being perfect all the time. I have more humility than most people could ever imagine. I'm very humble. I don't think of because I think I'm the most wonderful human being that ever existed. But so you can see how humble I am. But uh, I do try. Uh, all joking aside, I do try to model the behaviors that I wish to see in the world. And so that's really a very short answer to your question, because most complex questions can be answered very briefly. So
I agree.
all we have to do is get up in the morning and decide, how would I like all the other people in my life to be? And then I decide to demonstrate that, to use my life as a demonstration to the degree that I can. And, given the situations that arise in my day-to-day life.
So, what
I,
do
s-
you do when you have created the change in you, but the outside world has not reflected back to you that change?
I move to a place of compassion. I move to a place of understanding. I see if I can understand what causes the rest of the world, or the world that I'm now encountering, to not be reflecting to me the change that I wish to see. So because of what I don't even really, frankly, try to forgive it. I simply understand it because I was told in my conversations with God that understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. So when I can understand why another person would speak to me in a certain way, for example, when I can understand that, suddenly I realize, oh, I can and I often even say to that person, even in the moment of our disagreement, I might say to that person, I don't agree with you, but I can understand how you could feel that way. And suddenly they don't feel rejected or made wrong or belittled or marginalized. They suddenly feel heard. You know what, my friend? All of us only want to be heard. We simply yearn to be heard. And most of us don't even have to be agreed with by everybody. But if we feel heard, we feel okay. It's only when we feel unheard that no, you're not listening to me. You're not listening to me. That's the kind of thing that I used to say when I was in my 20s. You're not listening to me. But I found myself saying it a lot because I felt that the world was not listening to me. But of course, the truth is, it was me who was not listening to everyone else. When I began listening to everyone else, they began listening to me.
So, what do you have to say about boundaries then, especially when you are, or I don't know if you have experience with narcissistic individuals who it's like, even if you hear them, and mention your preferences, that this is what I would prefer, and they disrespect your boundaries, and you have understood why they are doing it, and you have had an open conversation, and nothing changed, how would you handle such a situation?
Hopefully with love, and hopefully by lovingly announcing in a gentle, loving way that I have a certain boundary. I'm going to use a simple example just to make the point, a very simple example. I'm a non-smoker.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody that I really, really love comes into my house, but decides to take out a cigarette and light the cigarette, I will say to them, I'm so sorry. I know that you really want to have that cigarette, and you're welcome to go outside if you want to have a smoke. But I'm going to ask you if you'd be kind enough not to smoke in my house because it's a boundary that I've established in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to have cigarette smoke filling the air in my home. So would you
Mm-hmm.
be willing to not smoke now?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the same thing lovingly to any other person who had a particular behavior that I disagreed with, whether it was speaking to me in a certain disrespectful way or treating me physically badly, I would simply say, I'm sorry. It doesn't feel good for me when you do what you've just done or say what you just said. I wonder if you could help me. Oh, by the way, that's one of the important things that I say. I ask the other person for help. I don't make them wrong. I say to them, if you were to say something to me that I found offensive, what I would say to you is, could I ask you for some help on something? Would you please be willing to help me with something? Hopefully you might say, okay, what? And then I would say, well, when you speak to me in that tone of voice, or when you say things like you just said to me a minute ago, somehow I let that hurt my feelings. And somehow I allow that to cause me to feel a bit angry. And I don't want to feel that way, but it's not your fault. It's over here. It's how I am dealing with what it is that's occurring outside of me. So it's my response that is the challenge and that is the problem. I wonder if you could help me with my response. And until I can solve this tendency within me, I wonder if you could also help me in the future by not speaking to me in that way.
And what do you do if they repeated that? Have you ever had such a
No,
situation?
no, honestly, when I talk to people that way, almost always, I'm going to say always, they say to me, of course, I'll be very happy to do that. And I didn't mean to offend you. I'm sorry if it bothered you. And we come to a place in the middle between us that can be peaceful, if not totally pleasant. No, nobody ever says to me, no way, leave me alone. I'm going to continue being a bad person. Because you know what I've discovered is that most people don't enjoy feeling that they are hurting another person. Most people don't enjoy that. But if there is a narcissist or someone who is really, into hurting other people, then I just say to them, I'm sorry, I have a boundary here that I cannot allow you to cross. And so, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave the room right now. And you're welcome to stay in this room as long as you wish, but I'm going to leave the room and probably go out and get in my car and drive away. And I'm not sure that I would choose to continue interacting with you in a personal way again. I just tell them the truth, but I tell it to them in a soft and gentle, compassionate way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't raise my voice. I don't wave my arms. I don't make them wrong. I just tell them gently and softly what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm. That's thanks for sharing that because
Yeah, because if you keep on asking me these kinds of questions, I'm leaving. Goodbye.
okay.
Okay, maybe I'm not.
Oh my God, your humor took me off guard. I was like, um, I'm actually glad you explained that. And I intentionally wanted to bring up the boundaries because I have noticed sometimes in coming from a place of love and understanding, we are human beings, we are growing, we learn so much, and our spiritual journeys are not the same. So I didn't want to lose the sight of being understanding and loving at the same time, upholding our boundaries so that both are balanced in our lives, because I have done the other one and not this one in my life, and I learned it the hard way. So that is why I thought it is important for the audience to know your perspective on boundaries. Like,
Well, let me add something if I may. I include myself on the list of people that I love. And like you, I didn't always. When I was a younger person, I didn't include myself. I
Mhm.
tried to love everybody else, and I didn't include myself as a person that I wanted to love. But around 30 years ago or so, I decided, you know what? I'm going to put my name on the list of people that I love. And I'm going to treat myself with love just as I treat you with love and other people in my life with love. So I learned to love myself enough to gently, compassionately, and softly communicate to another person what my boundaries are.
Totally makes sense. And I'm glad that you brought it out that not prioritizing our boundaries is also not putting us in the list of people we love and how we treat them. So thanks for summarizing that. I wanted to hear something if you're comfortable sharing, but then you said you are. So I'm going to ask you anyway. So, in many of your conversations with God books, you mentioned about receiving letters and mails from people all over the world asking you different kinds of questions. And some of them were also critics or from critics who said, "Oh, no, you are not channeling God," or "I don't believe you are channeling God anymore." At least in Tomorrow's God, I remember that. So I wanted to ask you about the negative comments that you have received, and I wanted to make the purpose clear. Most of the time, when we are focusing on the positive, we forget the benefits that our not so pleasant experiences also bring. So I wanted to clarify why I'm asking this question. Many of my clients and people who are just stepping into spirituality, they have something what is called as the visibility wound, meaning they feel very unsafe coming out into spirituality and being seen and heard. So these people are afraid to be visible because they are afraid of criticism and judgment from those who are either not spiritual or people who don't believe what they are doing is spiritual or whatever. So, this is the reason I'm asking you this question is to give hope to those people who are starting a spiritual career but are afraid that they don't know what are the consequences of fame. So, your answer will give courage to others who want to enter spirituality so that they know that criticism will always come and there will always be unpleasant emails, but that should not stop them from living their purpose or speaking their truth. So, can you tell me some of the criticism or hate mails, if any, if you have received after you got famous with Conversations with God?
Well, sure. Some people have said that I am an instrument of the devil because I'm saying things like hell does not exist, and there's no such thing as Satan, and there's no such thing as right and wrong, which are statements that were made in the Conversations with God dialogue. So people have written to me and said, you know, I consider you to be an instrument of the devil. Some other people have not been quite as dramatic, but they have said to me, I just disagree with your theology. I think your theology is all messed up. I don't know where you're getting it. And if you think you're actually talking with God, that you're not only misled, but you're a blasphemer. You're an apostate. You're a heretic. So please don't blaspheme anymore. Please stop it. So I've had those kinds of emails and letters from people all over the world. In addition to, of course, the letters of people who really have been a positive reaction to what they've read. I'd like to clarify something, however. I'm not, and I tell people, I'm not channeling God. I don't, the idea of channeling, most people, not everyone, but most people, when they think of a person who's channeling, think that there's another entity that's overtaking their body and is speaking through them, while their own particular personality has been set aside for a while because now they're channeling God. I don't want anyone in the world to think that I channel God. I do not. Any more than Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John channeled Jesus. They didn't channel Jesus. They just heard what he said and made a record of it. They basically, in a sense, they were taking dictation. I mean, Jesus was talking and they were remembering what he said and writing it down. So I don't channel God. I'm not a channel for God, but I do. I'm a very good reporter. I actually used to be a newspaper reporter. So I learned how to take good notes when I'm in the middle of a two-way exchange. And what I hear in my mind is not channeling. They're just simply thoughts that come to me, seemingly out of nowhere. I may ask a question and I'll receive an answer in my mind. And it's like the sound of my own thoughts, but they're thoughts that I never had before, thoughts that no one ever shared with me before. And in fact, they're often thoughts that contradict what I was taught in the earlier years of my life. So I just wrote them down. I was really taking dictation. And then those thoughts would bring up other questions on my behalf. I would say, how can that be? I don't understand. And then I would get an answer to that question. And then I would ask another question and get an answer to that question. And
So, how
before
did you
I,
differentiate these two thoughts, yours and the unknown ones?
the unknown ones were thoughts that I never had before. The Conversations with God dialogue is filled with thoughts that I never had before in my life. That's why I knew it was, I want to say, coming from somewhere else. And almost all of the dialogue in those conversation books reflect ideas that I never had in my life. In fact, I got to tell you something, to be honest with you. Sometimes when I would get the thought in my mind, I would almost be afraid to write it down. I'd be scared that, what if, this can't be true? This can't be right. For instance, to give you an example, I was told there's no such thing as right and wrong. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, that can't be true. What's going on here? And then it was explained. I said, how can you say that? And then the thoughts came to me. There is no such thing as right and wrong. There is only what works and what does not work, given what it is you're trying to do. For instance, and I said, give me an example. God said, well, punching somebody in the stomach, is that right or is it wrong? I said, well, it's not right. You shouldn't punch somebody in the stomach. And the answer I got was, what if they've broken into your house and they're trying to steal your baby and taking your baby out of the crib? Maybe would you punch them in the stomach then? I said, well, that's all different. That's a whole different situation. And God said, that is precisely my point. There is no such thing as right and wrong. There is only what it is you're trying to do. And whether it works or does not work, given what it is you're trying to accomplish. But you know what's sad, my friend? Most people that I observe on the planet, myself included, do not know what they're trying to do, or at least they didn't. I didn't in the early years of my life. I didn't know what I was trying to do. I didn't know what I was doing here. I thought I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah, I had a whole plan for my life. Get the job. I was 17 years old, 18 years old. Get a job, get a good car, get the girl. Usually in that order, because the girl didn't want anything to do with me if I didn't have a car or a good job. So, but I thought it was about, okay, get the job, get the car, get the girl, and then maybe even ultimately get the wife, then get the house, get the nice apartment or get the nice house, then get the children, then get the better job and get the better car, and then maybe even get the better wife and get the better wife and get the better wife. And, and do and just and then get the office in the corner with your name on the door, and then get the building on the corner with your name on the store, and then, finally get the gray hair, get the retirement watch, get the cruise tickets, get home from the cruise, get the illness, and get out, called die. And that's that's what I thought the plan was for life. It was really very simple. It's what my culture told me. That's what I thought I was doing here. And I lived that way in my 20s, 30s, and 40s. Only until I passed the age of 50, somewhere around the age of 52 or 53, did I realize, oh my golly, there's more going on here than meets the eye. Shakespeare was right. When Shakespeare wrote in his play Hamlet, he was right when he said, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. He was profoundly correct. There's more going on here than meets the eye. I'm not here to get the guy, get the girl, get the car, get the job, get the house, get the kids, get the grandkids, get the retirement watch. That's not what I'm doing here. I came here for a spiritual reason, to experience and to demonstrate who I really am. And that's what every person on a spiritual path is doing consciously. But most people, like me, were unconscious and not even aware of what they were doing. So they thought they were trying to just get stuff. You know the difference between humanity and divinity? The difference between humanity and divinity, and as well as individuals who are demonstrating divinity, the difference is that individuals who are demonstrating divinity are constantly giving. And people who are demonstrating humanity are constantly gathering, trying to get more love, more money, more time that they need to do what they want to do, more stuff, more things for the house, whatever they want more of, more food, more. But people who are demonstrating divinity are constantly giving, rather than trying to gather. That's the difference. And when I
I think
really realized that,
that's what you said about service, I think. Yeah. Go on.
yeah, but I wasn't until I was 53 years old that I understood that. And then it took me another few years to even get into the habit of realizing, what am I doing in the room? I'm not here to get something. I'm here to give something. And you know what's interesting? When I give something, I am getting something. See, I used to think when I was a younger man that if I was giving something that was really wonderful, I was there for other people. But the truth is that when I'm giving to other people, I'm there for myself, because that's when I feel the best about myself. So it serves me to serve others. Wow. Why did it take me till I was 53 to figure that out? So now I serve myself when I say, how can I serve you?
I really like that how you explained that when you are really serving others, you're serving yourself, because I think this is where most spiritual people make mistakes. They feel giving means being selfless, like not really looking out for yourself but others. But in giving others, we are actually serving ourselves in some way. We're just not aware of it. So if
Yes,
you're
and
going
do you know how I learned that? You know where I learned that? And we're all adults here, so can I talk to you like an adult?
yeah, go.
I learned that in bed. I learned that in bed with my lovers. because when I realized that, oh, I see, as I am giving of myself to another person, I am receiving at the same time. But in the old days, when I was just a younger man, I was just trying to get whatever I wanted to get, just trying to get whatever I wanted to get out of the experience. Only when I got to be a little more mature did I realize, oh, there's more going on here than meets the eye.
Mm-hmm.
As I give of myself with no need to receive, I receive more than I ever thought I could possibly experience. That's called pure love.
Mm-hmm. So when you mentioned about the process of you writing the conversations with God, it matched exactly how I channel when I'm writing. It's like you get the thoughts. For me, it's like either the thoughts or a voice, and I'm writing that. It sounded very similar to channeling. Um, so yeah, I also channeled Yeshua. So when you were saying they didn't channel Yeshua, I was like, okay, who am I channeling then? But I do verify the beings and their veracity through my own ways. So that's a interesting perspective I heard from you. So I want to understand a little bit about your book, God Talk. Now, I have read your Conversation with God series, and God Talk was very different from those. Like, I didn't expect a book like God Talk from you. I was like, okay, let's read through. Like maybe because my expectation is like I love the conversations with God so much. It has so much humor, so much insight. I laugh, I cry, I experience everything every time I read. God Talk was mostly about other people's experience with God. So I wanted to understand what was your inspiration to write God Talk? Like,
Well, my inspiration came over the phone. I had an experience that I've never had before. I had a publisher call me. Most authors who write a book, they write what they want to write, they say what they want to say, then they try to find somebody to publish it. If they have a literary agent, the literary agent does what he calls shopping it around. He shops it around to see if he can find a publisher. So, but publishers don't call people and say, write a book for us. But in fact, in this case, my phone rang one day and it was a publisher. And they said, would you be willing to write a book for us? I said, really? What did you have in mind? They said, we would like you to write a book that explains to people how they can have their own conversation with God. I said, I'd be happy to write that. And they said, and we're going to include in the book stories of other people who have also experienced God intervening in their life. I said, wonderful, wonderful. Then it won't be all just about me. It'll be a testimony to the fact that this is happening to many, many, many people around the world. In fact, I was told that all of us, every human being, not just special people, are having conversations with God. We're simply calling it something else. Women's intuition, or an epiphany, or a sudden insight, or I had a brilliant idea. But it's simply, I simply call it what it is, a direct communication from the larger part of myself, which I call God. So I wrote down the process that I think could help people to have their own conversation with God. 6 important steps that could move them closer to an interaction, a direct experience of talking with God. So that was the inspiration. The inspiration was really a telephone call from a publisher asking me to write the book.
okay, that was unexpected, but thanks for sharing that. So, in the 6 steps, you mentioned step 3 was willingness. Like, willingness sounds like obvious. Like, of course, if people want to talk to God, they have some degree of willingness. But do you mean something else?
Well, I think the reason I said that willingness is the third step is that we have to be willing not just to have a conversation with God, but we have to be willing to move in an opposite direction from the cultural story in which most of us are living. We have within humanity, my observation is that we have a cultural bias against the idea that some people don't even think there is a God, but if they do think there is a God, they certainly don't think that God would talk to an average, ordinary, everyday person. Maybe God would talk to the Pope, okay, maybe the chief ulama or the head rabbi, but that's not going to talk to the first baseman for the New York Yankees. It's not going to happen. So there's a cultural bias against the idea. And so willingness takes courage. It takes courage not only to have a conversation with God, but to be willing to embrace the experience and not call it something else. So it's just my imagination. It's just my imagination. So
That's
we
the
have
most
to,
common one.
yes, exactly. So I think that willingness is a very important step that allows us to really experience. No, this is not just simply my imagination. I'm actually hearing from a source within myself that is larger than my little mind and that is bigger than what I've been taught.
So, what would you advise people who are just starting the process? This is the same question I get from my students as well, but I wanted to hear your perspective about it. So, when somebody is receiving this communication from God, so there could be many ways they are receiving the communication, as described in your book, God Talk. And those stories were really fun and exciting. So, for a person who is like just getting initiated, who has a lot of self doubts, how can they know for sure that this is the message from something other than them?
By putting it into practice, by doing what they're told, by following the advice that they've been given, by not ignoring the message that they've received, but by actually engaging in an interaction with life that demonstrates that they have received the message and they're going to follow the suggestion, if you please, the advice that they've been given. That's what I did in my life. And when I began to follow the advice, I experienced that it worked. It worked almost every time.
Can you
That's when
give
I
an example? Like, I know that in the conversations you had objected to many things that God said. Like some parts felt like a live argument. Like I could sense the heat, battle heat, where you are disagreeing with God, and God is not backing out, but explaining. It's like a head-to-head match. So when you completely disagreed on many things, like you were giving example of right and wrong, for example, or you can pick any other example. So when you are receiving insights that is in disagreement to what you believe to be true, then like how can somebody even want to or be willing to try that when it's directly in conflict with their own viewpoint? Like how did you even bring about the alignment?
well, for me, it was a matter of utter curiosity. I just simply had to know whether there was any value or truth to what I was told. And let me give you another example. I was actually told in the conversation, Neale, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. Now, my friend, I should tell you, and I want your audience to understand, I didn't sit down to try to write a book. That was not the experience I was having. I was having a very sacred and a very private, personal encounter. I never dreamt that anybody else in the world, not even my spouse, not even my brother, I wasn't going to share this with anybody. I never dreamt that anyone else would ever see these interactions. But to give you an example of just what you're talking about, when I was told in the dialogue, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. I thought, now I gotcha. Now I gotcha. Because that's a prediction of something that's probably not going to happen. No publisher is going to put a book out because a guy says he's talking to God. No publisher is going to do that. And so I actually sent my handwritten notes. I went to I went to a copy place and I had them Xeroxed, and I sent Xerox copies of my handwritten notes to a publisher. Question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, in my own handwriting. I thought, okay, God, show me. And I got a telephone call 3 weeks later from a publishing house. And the publisher is a small publishing house. It wasn't like a huge New York publishing company, but they published maybe 5 or 8 books a year. And they called me and said, we want to publish your book. We love this. It's a great book. I said, you're kidding me. You're going to publish these notes, these handwritten notes I sent you? They said, yes, it's a great work of fiction. I said, wait a minute. You're not going to publish it as a work of fiction. And the publisher said, Mr. Walsch, are you trying to tell me you think this actually happened to you? We thought it was a fictional account of a person who, has a fictional argument with God, arguing all these. I said, no. This actually happened to me. He said, well, okay, we can put it out as a nonfiction book, but it's not going to receive 500 readers are not going to find it because nobody's going to want to go out and get a book because some guy claims to be talking to God. But, we'll put it out as a nonfiction book and, maybe we'll get 500 readers. And the publisher was right. He was right on, he hit the nail on the head. I did not get 500 readers. Got 5 million. Not bragging, just saying. I put it out there and God said, okay, I told you it would be accessed by many people. Watch this. 5 million readers in 37 languages.
So can I ask you an honest question? So
Even
did you
6
start?
readers in India.
So do you think, did you start implementing the things mentioned in the conversation with God after those 5 millions, or did you start before them?
Well, a little bit of both, actually. The big ones, the big ideas, after I realized that this was a communication from the divine. Some of the smaller ideas, I tried to put into place because I found them interesting, even if I didn't totally trust and completely believe that this was coming from a higher source. So it was really a little bit of both, but certainly the major ideas. For instance, the idea that there's no such place as hell, and that an entity called Satan does not exist. And I said to God, well, where did we get the idea of Satan? And God said, Satan is simply an abbreviation. It's an acronym, Satan, seeing anything as negative. That's Satan. When you see something from a negative point of view, you're seeing it as negative. And that's what we call Satan. But there's no entity, there's no such person as the devil. So now for me to actually embrace that idea, because I was taught all my life by my religion and by my culture, that of course there is a devil. So for me to have to embrace the notion that the devil does not exist, that all there is in the afterlife is pure joy, unlimited freedom, and unconditional love. And that God simply says to all of us, every one of us, no matter what we've done in the minuscule time we've been here on earth, God says to all of us, welcome home. Even if we are the prodigal son, God says, welcome home. And to people like you, what God says is, Well done, good and faithful servant.
Can you give examples of some of the teachings you have implemented in your life which made you feel like visible changes than how you used to live? Like, I think the biggest problem with spiritual awakenings is like the biggest reason people don't go for spiritual awakenings or don't care about is like, how will it change my life? Or maybe it will make me feel better, but how does it solve my real life problems? So my biggest challenge I feel is, how can we make spirituality as a way of life? We don't need to be a monk or sit in the Himalayas or meditate all day to be spiritual. We are spiritual beings. So like, it's always serves a positive purpose if you are giving examples. Like, how did you take, like, you can use any example.
Well, let me give you an example. I'll just give you an example. The way I think. I changed the way I think. When I had negative thoughts, there's not enough, oh, there's not enough time, I can't get this done, there's not enough money, I'll never have enough money, there's not enough love, whatever, whenever I had any negative thought at all, I simply trained my mind to say, stop it, just stop thinking that way. And then I began to deliberately think in a positive way and to actually visualize. I'm going to give you a perfect example. Again, having to do with the publication of my first book. When the publisher said, we're not going to find 500 readers, I said to myself, you know what? I'm not buying that idea. I began visualizing my post office box overflowing with letters from readers from across the world. And do you know, in 3.5 months, that's exactly what happened. Exactly that way. I went to my post office box one day and opened the post office box, and dozens of letters fell out. Not 3 or 4, but 25 or 30 letters. And they were postmarked all over the world. I even got a letter, believe it or not, from India and from Japan and from Russia, from Moscow. I was getting mail from all over the world, from people saying, this book is changing my life. And I'm not bragging about it. I'm just telling you what happened. So you asked for an example of how I've used the information I was given. God said to me, the way you think and the way you speak is powerful in creating your reality. What you think and what you say places into the universe the energy of creation. So that was something that I was told in my conversation with God, and I decided to take God up on it. I said, we'll see about that. So I began thinking and speaking in a very positive way. And by gosh and by golly, as we say in America, by golly, what I was dreaming of came true in my life. I'm going to give you one final example as well. I used to think, I can never find the partner of my dreams. I mean, I've had so many broken relationships. I don't seem to know how to make a relationship work, and I can never find that perfect, lady who could just be perfect for me, a perfect fit psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, But then after my conversation with God, I began having different thoughts. I began actually thinking, my perfect person is coming to me now. My perfect lady is on her way to me now.
Did you used to spend time thinking about this every day, or is it like, how did you go about it?
Well, from time to time, I didn't spend time. I didn't, set the clock and say every day at 1 o'clock I'm going to think about this. But when the thought crossed my mind about my future, or when I had a yearning for a life partner, I would think, you know what? My perfect partner is on the way to me now. And within 3.5 months, I had a party at my house, just a small gathering, but a friend came over and brought his girlfriend with him. I hate to say it, but he made a big mistake because she told me later that she took one look at me and said to herself, I'm supposed to be with this guy. This is my other. And as soon as I saw her, it was love at first sight. but I didn't want to say anything, of course, because she was a guest with him. So I let it, I did, but she wound up calling me. She called me and said, I don't mean to be forward, but I just really had a special feeling when I met you. My dear friend, let me tell you, that was 17 years ago. We have been married for 17 glorious years. She is the perfect person for me. Does she never do anything that I don't like or that I disagree with? Of course. Is she the perfect human being on the planet? Not in that sense. But is she the perfect match for me? Absolutely. We like the same food. We like the same music. We like the same books. We have the same philosophy. And we're also good in a particular room of the house. So,
Okay.
we're compatible in every way. And what was interesting about that? I didn't have to search for that anymore. It literally came into my house. It came to me. So you asked me for a practical example of how I used messages. The message that I got from God was, as you believe it, so will it be done unto you. Therefore, think only positive thoughts and speak only positive words, and do that for a while and watch your life change. I could, of course, be wrong about all of this, but I don't think so.
You have a living example. So, any final words from you or God?
God's most important message to the world. You've got me all wrong.
That is
I do
true.
not, I do not judge, I do not condemn, and I do not punish. I only love you without condition. And when you love each other in the same way, your world will change overnight.
Agreed. It was fabulous talking to you, Neil. And I hope our audience also enjoyed this session. So, we'll see you again.